and this is a test, or you're not in training, it's just part of your credentialing and certification. They bring in actors, and they start talking, and it's like, does my guy pick up on this stuff? And the actor's paid to come in with counselors and like drop symptoms and see if the counselors catch them or not.
All right.
It's a quality
5,
control thing.
4,
There's none of that going
3,
Oh yeah, there is.
2,
on. Not here.
1.
Oh well, you're not in counseling.
Steve, pleasure to have you.
Paid and pleasure to be had.
How was the trip in?
The trip was excellent. We
Yeah.
had a great time. We had a layover in Atlanta, had some great sandwiches out there, and had a very good time. The wife had a good time, and if she's happy, I'm happy.
Nice. We'll have to tell her I said hi. You two are wonderful people.
I will.
Yeah.
I will.
So we first met at Brett's wedding
Yeah.
back in September, and we kind of, before we knew we were sitting next to each other, we were like 45 minutes deep into a conversation, and it was really stimulating, and you have an awesome brain, and your experience is incredible as well. And so I kind of want to start from the beginning, give folks a snapshot of your journey and how you got to become where you are today, where it all started.
Boy. It starts. It would start with reading a dictionary.
Yeah.
That's the weird. That sounds crazy. The first book I really enjoyed reading, past little golden books as a kid with Mom, I got a dictionary, and just learning about words. And it was an old dictionary that had etymology, derivation, stuff like that, and in the back it had Indo-European root terms. And even as a little kid, it's like I'd find these cool new words, and then to read where they came from, and that there were all these other histories and cultures and languages and all that stuff, and proto-terms and, mama, papa, all that kind of stuff. And it started with me from a very young age, learning the impact that words have on other people. And I vividly remember being in first grade, and we lived in a small rural area, Holden, Missouri, and I was a very verbal young guy, and usually boys aren't that verbal. And so for the speaking part, for the big school Christmas pageant kind of thing, in first grade, second grade, third, every class was up, I had a speaking part. And I remember hitting the floodlights, on stage, which is in a small rural cafeteria in Holden, Missouri back in 1958, 57, something like that, and talking. And the audience, and I could see them, and, people leaned in and they listened, and it was like they were nodding their head and all that stuff. So it's elementary school it started. I was at a PTA meeting in sixth grade, and they were having a discussion with the parents, and then brought some kids in, some of the students. What do we need? It was a new school, and they had a focus group set up. And they said, come on down. Any parents who want to talk, come on down. Any students who want to come on. I was the first kid. Bang! Got down there, and all the adults were just leaning back. And I walked in and I sat down. I wanted a dictionary in the library. And so I got here because of dictionaries.
Wow. Yeah, I've met a few other folks that started reading the dictionary at a very young age, and they're some of the smartest folks I've ever met. So that kind of is making sense there. And so you were a professor at West Virginia for how long?
88 to 90. Well, they carried me for a couple of years. 88 to 98.
Okay.
And then I went into the Fed as a senior scientific administrator, something I recommend for everybody. Everybody should work for the Fed for at least a year. Not the state, although that would be educational too. Every American should be required to do a year as a government servant to understand what our government's about, because you have no idea what it is, and then you go to work for it, and you realize the separation of powers. You understand who can do what, why things happen.
I went to Israel 2 years ago, and everybody has to do a mandatory 2 years in the military. And they have such a deeper sense of pride and patriotism and appreciation for the country and what's really going on. Their perspective, they're not naive. And I find a lot of naivete, and especially in the millennial generation, and they have no idea how our political system works, how
Right.
the government branches work.
Right.
So I think that that's something that they should require within the U.S. government.
Oh, yeah, I strongly, well, whether it's military or I just think having a GS3 or a GS5, a low-level position, do that for a year and just, see the email and the memos. And it would be particularly helpful if you could be working in the government under a Republican administration and then a Democratic administration and see how things change.
Yeah.
With it, not only with political appointees, but how it focuses down on the bureaucratic, which allegedly is protected by kind of a tenure system, the GS system. But that GS can change that fast, and guys who are careerists can change very, very rapidly from one side to the other, depending on how that goes. I'm glad you mentioned the pride in country. When I came in the first day in the Fed was ridiculous. I got fingerprinted and filling out forms and all. I mean, they own you, okay? And the last thing that happened is they took me in kind of like a room like this and had a camera like that and put me in front of a flag. And I think they had a copy of the Constitution. And I put my hand on it. And I took the presidential oath of office. I'll start crying when I go, because I cried when I did the oath. Uphold, defend the Constitution, and protect and defend, and all that. And it's like I'd still do it. I'd take a bullet for the country. I mean, I'm out of the Fed. I'm long gone from that. But this is my country, and I didn't feel that way before. It was a very different experience with it, and to have. And what else was so funny, when this was happening, I'm watching it, and it's a standard social psych manipulation. It's a commitment consistency play that you get people to make an oath in front of a camera or in front of a flag or something, or just another person. And you crush them, you nail them. The psychology of doing something like that is so powerful. And I'm sitting there taking the oath of office, which I didn't expect, and I'm reading it, and I'm watching the camera, and I'm realizing, I've been reading about this like since 1966. And this is what you do with people to jerk them around in a social psych experiment. And here I am.
Yeah. So how'd you get the opportunity to work internally with the Fed?
Dumb luck. It was the hand of God. I was getting bored as a professor. The field wasn't moving the way I wanted to. I'm very analytic and scientific oriented in the field, and I was in communication primarily with the psychology work, and it was turning very cultural studies. All the PC war guys were with that, and I was getting kind of tired. And Melanie and I were flying to a conference in Montreal, and I'm against the window, she's in the middle seat, and I hear my name, and she's talking about me with this guy on the aisle seat. And that's a little odd, and I just kind of looked over, and it's like I didn't recognize him. I thought he'd be at the conference. And it turns out he was a Fed. He was headhunting. And he said, I'm going up to Montreal. I'm looking for a guy named Steve Booth-Butterfield. And Melanie said, well, he's sitting right over here. And so Alan and I had a conversation, and Alan recruited me to come in, and I met him, and he was a goofball. And I thought, well, maybe I could do some consulting, make some extra money and all that.
And you're still a professor at this time.
And I'm working at the med school and the cancer center and expanding out in that direction and doing community interventions in the media to change lifestyle behaviors. And that's how they heard about me, was because of that. This was the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, and they, through politics, knowing about your government, Senator Byrd, who was the senior senator from West Virginia at the time, had built this new facility that was actually closer to my house than my office was at the university. And this new facility was up. It was a science facility, and they were going to have this major new communication unit out there. And Alan was starting it up. So he brought me in, and I did a sales pitch. And he said, yeah, you'll need to meet the division director till he meets everybody. And I told Melanie about it, and she said, bring your CV along. I'm like, I'm not going to go to work for these guys. They're idiots. And she said, bring the CV. So I brought my CV along, and did the pitch for the unit, and then he introduced me to the division director, it's in military terms. Al was a general, would have been his rank, and the position that this fella had who brought me in was a colonel. okay, at the rank level. So I meet the general, and he's this kind of fat, balding, white-haired guy, and just kind of,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, God, a Fed, you know, like, you got to be kidding me. And I'm wearing my med school outfit, which is a navy blue blazer and beaten up khaki slacks and a white button down and a striped tie, because that's what med school guys do, and bad shoes. And that's how they're all dressed over there too. And so I got that right, and I walked down and I hand the CV to Al. And usually people just like reach across and they kind of like weigh it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Al stopped the conversation, and he just went through, and he read the whole thing in that first time I met him. And he looked at me and said, "I'm getting rid of Al, and I'd like to hire you." And I'm like, first, it's like, now I know why I love my wife.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she told me to bring this thing, and he read through my CV, and that's holding. He said, "This is the guy. I want this guy, and I want to get rid of the doofus who's doing the startup."
And what exactly were they looking for?
They were looking for a scientist. They were looking for a guy who was analytical and mathematical. And usually with guys in the social sciences, they tend to be very conceptual and sneaky, like I was telling you, this commitment, consistency, manipulation with a camera. They want guys who think like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was gifted with math.
Mm-hmm.
And she could tell by looking at my list of publications and all that kind of stuff. And we had a little math talk. And there were 250 positions. 235 were physicists, mathematicians, chemists, biologists, science guys. The communication guys were all graphic arts, little IT, some of that stuff. They weren't science guys.
Mm-hmm.
And so he knew I had that kind of a credential, and that's why he wanted me in on all of it.
So how long were you with the Fed?
Just 4 years.
And what was a typical day-to-day like?
The first 2 years were incredible. The Fed is one of the worst jobs for a person with any brains, imagination, and ambition, because it's limitless. If you've seen the movie Casablanca, you know there's Rick's, Humphrey Bogart, okay, and everybody goes to Rick's, okay, in the movie, and that's where all the action happens. The federal government is Rick's. Everybody in the world goes to the Fed. Everybody wants something from the Fed. They go to Congress, they go to the Supreme Court, they go to the president, they go to the executive agencies. If you've got imagination and ideas, there's always a problem. You know, there's always a solution that needs to be found. And if you're any good at all, if you got any brains at all, the Fed just, here's a plane ticket. You know, here's an expense account. Go. How many people you need? Go do that. So the first 2 years were cocaine. I mean, it was a gas. Al, the guy who hired me, had tried out for the New York Yankees as a catcher and didn't get the job because Elston Howard was the other guy he was competing against. And they picked out Elston Howard, who was a Hall of Fame, I think. He was at least an MVP.
Okay.
Al didn't play Yankee baseball because an MVP guy was there, you know, that much better.
Mm-hmm.
Al was a catcher, and he had a stupid fastball pitcher. And those 2 years, Al was always talking with me, and he was one of the most dangerous guys I ever met in my life. And he had that, you know, here I'm Uncle Al,
Mm-hmm.
just gray hair and,
Yeah.
you know, kind of goofy, and he didn't dress particularly well
Uh-huh.
and any of that stuff. And you never had Al was always walking up behind a guy,
Mm-hmm.
and then they hit the floor, you know, and
Interesting.
yeah,
And so what years were you with the Fed?
98 to 2002.
And so you experienced 9/11.
Yes, excellent job. A couple of things happened with that. I got hired into the Clinton administration. I got hired by liberal Democrats who were at the political level, and they were looking to hire liberal Democrats, and I was at the time. I was a standard secular humanist professor. And so, yeah, lifestyle police, food police, all that kind of stuff, that's what I was doing. And within a month of being in the Clinton administration and working there, the first thing I thought is, we've got too much money here. I mean, I couldn't spend all the money they were giving me. Okay, there was so much. I said, there needs to be a tax cut. This government has too much money. Well, then Bush got elected in 2000. There was a tax cut. There were tremendous changes. It was just instantaneous. And a lot of the freedom I had for the first 2 years went away immediately with the Bush administration. That's why it'd be nice to work across two different ones. So the nominal job they hired me to do when they were recruiting me was to get involved in, and I'll get all freaked out on this, a national program dealing with first responder safety. And it was a national campaign, fire, police, EMT, at major disasters. Do you know by any chance what the leading cause of death for first responders is?
Nope.
Structural collapse.
Oh.
Okay.
And these are like paramedics and firemen?
All of them. Okay. Police officers too. Okay. The number one killing thing for them is getting caught in a structural collapse. Okay. That's what this program and campaign was about, and they wanted a communication site guy to come in and help deal with it, because that's what kills guys who are first responders. Because a lot of times it's in dangerous buildings where this stuff happens. So I spent 2 years with Clinton, and then the first year with Bush, working particularly with firefighters. And so when the buildings got hit, it was horrifying because I knew my clients, my people were going into this, and it was like, this is the number one frickin' killer of these guys, okay? I could see the buildings burning. It's like, this is not safe for my people. They've got to be following the recommendations. I've spent the last 3 years, because I'm this hotshot persuasion guy, and I was brought in to do it and flying all over. And I lost 350 guys that day. It was horrifying, and I knew it. I could see it. And I apologize for
you're good.
For that.
Take your time.
As part of it, the fear that struck the Fed at the attacks was so intense that all federal facilities got shut down across the United States, because they didn't know how many planes were up and how many different attack vectors there were and any of that stuff. But they knew that federal facilities were getting hit, okay? And I had a team. I had a team that was working on a workplace project out at Reagan, and they were staying at the hotel across from the Pentagon. And I was concerned about my guys and where they were, if they'd gotten away from the Pentagon, and communication went to hell in a handbasket,
So this is the day of 9/11.
Yeah.
I mean, what can you kind of, before you go into that, can you kind of talk about what the mood was like when all this was going down? Was it just complete chaos? Like, what were all the internal feds doing?
It stunned me. I came in at 9 o'clock, okay, and the buildings didn't start falling until shortly after that. I hadn't even heard of the airplane strikes, or I think I had maybe on the radio driving in. And the first thing I thought about was something I'd read a long time ago. It was around World War II. A B-25 Billy Mitchell bomber hit the Empire State Building because the pilot was clowning around, and pow. And I thought that's what had happened.
Yep. That's what I thought would happen. I was in 7th grade and I was watching it. I was eating waffles.
Okay.
Never forget that morning.
Okay, so I didn't see it live, and none of it. We didn't have TVs. This is a workplace. And I went up to Al's office, and he had a TV. When I was hearing about it, and somebody said, a plane hit a building. He said, yeah, I heard about it. And they said, no, another one. I was like, another plane hit the building. So I went up to Al, who had the TV, and it was up there, and the two towers are smoking, and I'd been in the Trade Center, and coincidentally, my best friend from college frequently worked in the WTC. He was a Citibank finance whiz, making $1 bazillion. And I thought, geez, not only have I got my firefighter guys and first responders up there, one of my best friends might be in the World Trade Center today, because I knew he was up there all the time. So I saw the buildings fall, and I nearly had a heart attack when I saw that. And everybody else was just like, yeah, that's bad. Everybody took it very cool. There was no panic in my building. I didn't hear about panic from other locations. Everybody was flabbergasted when we were ordered to leave. I was like, as soon as those buildings came down, I was going to go down to my unit. I had about 25 people. I was saying, we're going to Fort Bragg. We're going to get trained, and we're going to. And I was sure it was Iraq. I thought it was Saddam had done this thing or had been a part of it. And I said, this unit is going to learn how to use an M16, and we're going to take everything we know about communication and persuasion, and we're going to go over there and we're going to kill these fuckers. I'm ready to go for it. And everybody else is like, dude, chill out. It's okay. And it's like, no, it isn't. They killed 350 of my. Well, I didn't know it was that. No, I had no idea how many employees had gotten killed. And my best friend might be in that building, and so we're going after them. I had a very different response than virtually everybody else in the Fed because they were mainly Democrat type guys.
You had the same response to my dad, who was 50 years old at the time, and he was
50.
He was ready to enlist himself.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure a lot of Americans were.
No, they weren't. Oh, no. What's funny is Melanie was still teaching over at WVU, and we were ordered to clear out. And so I went home, and she didn't get home until much later. And I said, like, didn't you have to abandon ship at W? They said, no, we talked about it. Classes went on. It was no big deal. And I said, we evacuated every Fed facility in the United States. She was like, well, that's odd. And then I found out later that I was supposed to be on a plane to go to New York City the next day. And NIOSH is into a lot of workplace safety, and particularly airborne exposure to particulates, stuff like that.
Is that a government entity?
National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. And so they were going to be sending in engineers, and they wanted some communication guys on the ground too. And it just depended on how big the plane was. And they brought the short bus, and they didn't bring the long bus, so I didn't go to New York the next day, which is a good thing. It would have been a shattering experience for me emotionally, because I would have seen what, and to go back to the major lead-in with that, is I'm leaving my office that day having been ordered, and I'm chasing my guys out. I'm making sure that none of my people are in any risk at all. And as I'm walking to my truck, I got hit by the Holy Spirit, and I almost fell on the ground. And I heard, so, and it meant, you thought you're a pretty smart guy. You thought you had this under control. You're on cocaine. You're flying all over the place. You're wearing the blue suit. You're Mr. Fed. You can drop people. You can shut buildings down. You can shut facilities, offices. I can walk in anywhere in the world, okay? And I'm fixing this, and my first priority was firefighter, first responder safety, and I lost 350 of my guys. So how smart are you, is what I heard. And it killed me. I was an idiot. I didn't know anything. I was prideful. I was arrogant. I still am. But at least I understood it from a higher level. And I knew God existed in that moment, and it completely turned me around.
So it was literally just a word.
Yeah, and it was in my head.
And it was just so.
Yeah, and that rising, and it was kind of like being in seminar. And, you're a grad student, and you say something all smart, and, you've been reading some famous work in a theory, and you go like, this is stupid, and this and that, and the numbers, blah, 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 blah. And then somebody says something, like your graduate professor, and he makes a point, and he goes, so. And it's like, oh, I didn't read that part in the book, I guess. And it's like everything I just said was like, never mind. Can we hit the rewind tape on that and erase it? It's like, no, you said it all. You thought all of that stuff. And then the building falls on you. So how smart are you? How much control have you got? What have you really accomplished with your life and your beliefs?
And so you consider that a born again moment in your life?
Oh yeah, it was night and day. Yeah. And I went back to reading the Bible with open eyes. I've read it a lot. I read tags on pillows and mattresses. And anything that's on an airplane, I read all that stuff. Dictionary. And I just lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, so I went back to reading the Bible, not like a skeptic, but with open eyes. And it was like, I can't believe this. what have I missed? You know, here I am 50 years old, almost, 48, 49. And I was just stunned. And it took me a while to assimilate everything. And it's like I got hit very effectively, emotionally with it, which is not my style. I am a very energetic, edgy guy. Al constantly had to pull me off of people. I was always in attack mode, and I was very good at stand-up, and so I was doing presentations for NIOSH, for international and national groups and high-power political groups and all that, and somebody asked me a question. It was kind of smart-ass, and they were trying to make time on me, and I'd walk over at them, and Al, the catcher, would be doing this and wiping and all that, and keeping me away from killing verbally. You know, I'm not going to put my hands on somebody, but be that graduate professor, like lay the key point on and say, so, you know, shut up. I went from that to no, I'm not that kind of, that's wrong.
So were you part of the cleanup at all of 9/11?
No, I never got to the site. I did some follow up with it, and you know it's one of those horrible things of understanding what the science was. And I was watching the cleanup, and the guys who got sick because they didn't follow the rules. We had enough technology and science at the time to have minimized. Really, there hasn't been that much illness from those guys, and I'm being controversial saying that. And if I was with NIOSH, I'd get fired for saying it. They've paid a lot out to those guys, and that's been political. And it's like, I'm not trying to be hard-hearted. I mean, those guys suffered and got sick, but a lot of them were older, been on dangerous jobs, and they did not protect themselves. So I know that, but at the same time, God, I mean, they've been living their lives with the World Trade Center building, and they had 350 of their closest friends got killed. I don't know how they did it.
So working with, structurally, had these teams. Do you think it was structurally odd that the buildings went down? No,
not at all.
So was there, just leading into more of the conspiracy side of it, I mean, I don't really believe in it, but there's obviously been a lot of that. Do you have any feelings on that?
Oh yeah, I got a great deal of feelings about that. It comes up every now and then, and it's I know several people, and it's like the Charlie Sheen stuff and the CIA, and he knows about this because he worked on movies, and they had technical consultants, and he knows Navy SEALs and Delta guys and all that stuff, and that's exactly how those guys work. It's all I can do to resist punching people out when they say that. And it's like with the Kennedy assassination, and I'll start with that one first and then come to me. The conspiracy theory with John F. Kennedy and all that. His brother was the Attorney General, and remained Attorney General well after and through the investigation, Your brother has just had his head blown off, scattered all over his wife's pink dress, You think you're not moving heaven and earth to find out everything that got that guy?
Right.
Bobby Kennedy signed off on the Warren report, I was in the Fed when those buildings went down. You think for a minute, if I thought the CIA or some dark whatever was involved, I'd let that go? It's when people think like that, they don't realize the insult that they give to somebody like me. And there are a lot of guys like me in the Fed who were like, what happened? Who wasn't responsible for this? We got to figure this out. And if we'd had any indication, and NIST, National Institute for Standards and Technology, did the major report on the structural collapses. They're Fed guys. They went all over the place, and those guys were thinking the same thing. We failed on our job. A lot of people got killed because we didn't expect this and we didn't handle it right. Or did the CIA or somebody else like that put bombs in there? One CIA, we screwed up. We were building codes. We didn't expect, or some guys had. I mean, if you go back and read old literature on the building construction, it's like people did anticipate things like this and what could happen if a plane did something like that, or explosives were placed in the right positions in buildings. So yeah, it was predictable, and it was, geez, 2 weeks before the damn things went down, I was reading Fed's always having stuff, conferences. And it was a conference on terror attacks and terrorism, what are they likely to do. And it was literally reading in this book, some academic guy who studied terrorism, and he said, well, I guarantee you what's going to happen. They're going to take loaded 747s and crash them into tall buildings. That's how they're going to take them down.
Wow.
And, I read it, and then 2 weeks later, boom, blah, blah, boom. And it's like, but the book was this thick. There were like 200 experts, and they said, no, it's going to be anthrax. Oh, no, it's going to be fire next time. You want me closer to, am I doing okay? I thought it was getting a cue.
No, you're good. You're used to getting those.
So, yeah, I am. I know, because, and I get jacked up with stuff, and it's like, I notice people like starting to move away.
No, you're good. You're good.
Well, I'm on medication and
so they were already talking about it.
Oh yeah, but I mean there were a million theories.
Yeah.
And like I said, I mean if you read this book, to try and cover everything is like, I mean you're trying, right? What's the next number that's going to come up on this roulette wheel? Okay, and that's what happened.
Yep.
Okay, and if you could have known 00 was going to come up, well, we would have done the 00, protection.
Yeah.
But you don't know.
You don't know. So how long did you stay with the Fed after 9/11?
A couple of things happened. My agents, like I said, I wanted to go hardcore and get into this thing. We are going to war over this, and we should be involved in it. And I was told, shut up. Don't say that to anybody else. We're staying here. Stop doing it. So I didn't like that. Born again. That really came into it. The Fed's got to be neutral on that stuff. I mean, the Fed's got to be secular. The Fed cannot be a religious organization. Okay, we just can't allow that to happen because Jew, Muslim, whatever, and now they're in charge, and that's how we live the world. You can't do it. It's got to be by the Constitution. But I was feeling more alienation because so many people in the Fed are liberal Democrats. I mean, that's just how they are. The deep state. That everybody talks about. And it exists. I know who those guys are and how they think about it. And they wanted no part of this war. They didn't want to go to Iraq, and then it was Afghanistan. They especially didn't want to go there. I mean, good Lord. I mean, the food's terrible. And Fed, one way, you can always tell a long-term Fed, they can tell you where great restaurants are.
Yeah.
Feds know how to eat.
Yeah.
So
what did you do after the Fed? You went back to teaching?
No, I had.
First off, how was that exit process out of the Fed?
Well, roughly, Bush took over, so things started changing. It was harder for me to do the business. Al and I both realized that what they had wanted my unit to do would not be possible to do because we wanted to do it with humans. And the rest of the guys were working like with animal models or math or chemistry or whatever. Anytime the federal government has contact with a human being, it's having contact with a voter. So the hoops you got to go through to do anything remotely approaching research with people from a federal agency, it's insane. I mean, it would take a year for me to get clearance to do a stupid little project that I could have done in 2 days if I'd been a university professor. So clearly my unit was going to get shut down, okay? And what Al wanted me to do was essentially fire everybody. I'd stay on board, he loves me, and hire whoever I wanted and do whatever I want to do, okay? And then Al did some other things with me in terms of job evaluation, and he just pulled off. He had been the best mentor, best boss I'd ever had, and he just closed the door on me, and he closed the door on everybody. And I had a tremendous argument with him in his office, and it was reverberating through, I mean, everybody in the administrative area knew that Al and I were not having fun with each other. And I came out after the meeting and looked at his secretary and I said, can you tell me what's going on? And she said, this is what he does. He gets into startups, gets them off the ground 2 or 3 years, and then when everything's running, he just drops it and he goes off and does his thing, and everybody goes and does what he does, and he doesn't have contact with them anymore. And I was in love with Al. I mean, he was the best guy I ever knew, and he was the catcher, and we were a great battery, So I had a lot of conflict with him. born again, didn't fit in as well with my colleagues who were more
Your-
anti-war.
Your process thinking changed.
Yeah,
After that
yeah,
moment.
everything about me changed.
Uh-huh.
And I wasn't going back to WVU because they'd actually gotten worse. They were even more silly in what they were doing from what I wanted to do. Melanie was in a great position at WVU, very senior, named chair. She had become chair of the department. She was on state level committees for graduate programs, and they were flying her in the jet down to the governor's office. And I mean, she was in a really high power position, and she didn't want to leave. So I started doing consulting and writing, and wrote a pop press persuasion book, and did pharma guys, med guys, State Department, intelligence, defense. Worked within them in different ways. I was a lecturer, teacher. I don't remember what they called them, for the Brookings Institute, a Democrat think tank, and they didn't realize I'd become a born-again Christian conservative. And I got to work with them, and was actually out doing something, and Obama during the campaign came rolling through in 2008. And so I was doing all of that work and that kind of writing, but I fundamentally retired at age 50 and was just writing and doing occasional consulting work.
Do you have a specific story, a story that's you think best represents what you saw from the deep state?
Oh yeah, stop, drop, and roll. When Bush took over, it was before the 9/11 stuff. There was the Allen, the guy, the fool who had done the startup of my unit, was a very clever Fed. He understood the rules and regulations, and he was a GS-11, and he had a master's degree, and he couldn't get promoted any higher than that. Except if you're a supervisor, you cannot be having people at higher pay grades without you also having a higher pay grade. So Allen went out and hired anybody with a doctorate or any degree. I mean, he was just hiring people so he could get promoted. Okay, and I spent the first year killing these guys, because they were morons. They were incompetent. He had no idea what he was doing, and it's like, do you have a doctoral degree? Can you verify that? That's proven. You got the job. Okay. Well, he had hired a real politician. She was the head of the local union, and I wanted to get rid of her from the very beginning. She was great, nice. None of these people were evil or sneaky or mean or anything. They're just trying to make their own way with it. But she was an idiot. She didn't know how to do her job. She was not qualified for the position that she was hired in to do. And she should have been fired the day after I came on board. She should have never been hired. Okay. So Al and I talked with her. It was a setup to trying to get her moved on. And Bush had just taken over, and we were just sort of chatting, and she said, well, you know what everybody's doing around here with Bush? And we were like, well, no, what? She said, stop, drop, and roll. And Al and I looked at each other like, what do you mean? She said, we're in a fire here. And that's what everybody says. In a fire, you stop, you drop, and you roll. And you just let the fire go over you. And that's what the deep state is doing with Trump. They are rolling as low under the fire as they possibly can. They do it every time there's a Republican administration.
What is the fire?
The fire is whomever it is that wants to come in and get rid of them. And wants to get rid of them for cause.
The administration trying to clear out...
Yeah. Yeah, and part of the
trim
problem...
the fat,
pardon me?
Kind of trim the fat?
Well, you could call it trim the fat. You could trim the incompetence. Trim what's not necessary.
So go in and audit the employees that work for the Fed and say, you know what, you shouldn't even be in this position.
The system is designed in such a way it's to everybody's benefit for it to stay the way it is. In the illustration I was giving you with this guy who was the temporary chief, starting up, doing the build-up, and him deliberately hiring people who were more qualified on paper than he was so he could get a promotion. All the feds understand how that works.
Yeah.
They understand the rules.
How would you define what the deep state is?
The deep state is a self-protection agency. The deep state believes in the mantra more, governments have people than people have governments. They believe that government makes the world a better place. They believe that government is an instrument of social engineering, and that they, in their position as a federal employee, can make your life better because they know better for you. And if you do what I tell you to do, your life will be better. That's the deep state.
See, I always figured it more as it doesn't really. I always figured the deep state was a group of people that controlled
a mafioso kind of thing. Yeah. No, it's a philosophy, and they find each other very, very easily and very, very quickly. And all of the agents, they're in the Department of Defense, they're in the CIA, they're in commerce, they're everywhere. The Fed is a very safe place to work. It's always interesting for me to look carefully at like the Department of Justice and how often the Department of Justice loses trial cases. They put a lot of people away, but not at trial. Fed lawyers get their asses kicked when they go to trial because they're no good. I had several interviews like with FBI guys. I couldn't believe it. I wouldn't let them in a graduate seminar, and they're FBI agents. It's like, I don't know anything about the law, other than some basic training in contracts and stuff like that, and I know nothing about law enforcement. And I knew what their techniques were. They were clumsy and mistake prone. They would trade off, obviously, with each, and it was just, and I wasn't a target. Okay, I was just there to provide information. We had a bomb threat in our building. Somebody actually did try to blow up one of the labs. And they were interviewing over that. And I was like, I can't believe this. You won't catch anybody. I mean, the Fed is a magnet for incompetence. But they're there to make the world a better place, and they do enough. Now, there's some places like the IRS, they got to do that right. Because if they screw up your tax returns, there's going to be hell to pay. Social Security Administration, with all Social Security checks going out, they can't screw that up. All right, that kind of work, Fed is fabulous at. Tell you something else Fed is good at, big, like war. We know how to organize right now, go get it done, and roll you, okay? And it doesn't matter where it is, okay? That's pretty impressive. So there is a lot of competence in there. But the Fed is twice as large with employees. There are 1 million civilian employees. You could get everything. If 500,000 federal employees left overnight, you couldn't tell. You wouldn't know. Now, it would affect the economy.
How many Fed employees do you think there are?
I believe there are 1 million civilian and another 1 million or so military. And then there are a bazillion contractors. But they're not on the payroll, they're not on the pension, none of that kind of stuff.
We have a family friend who is my age, and her spouse, they were relocating to a very, very tiny town in Iowa. And I was talking to him more about it, and he's getting into the FBI. He worked at Cerner, and he passed the test, and now he's an FBI agent. They give him that Crown Royal car, and
Crown Vic,
and he has to wear the same outfit every day, and he's a Fed, and they don't, he hasn't really been told what to do, or what's going to happen when he goes to this town. I think this literally just happened this month, and then I was also told that there's someone like that in every single town across the entire country.
Wouldn't be surprised.
So it's creepy to hear that there's, if you live in a town with a couple thousand people, there's a Fed in there keeping their eyes on everything.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much of that's going on. It's just, he doesn't need to be there. I mean, you could cut, if there is in every town, it's like, why not every other town? And it's like, you've got here, we're near Missouri here, and Warrensburg and Sedalia. Okay, they're 30 miles apart, and then Marshall's 30 miles north of that. You need 3 Feds, and it's like, just put one in Sedalia, and they could cover the other ones. And that's what I'm talking about, the duplicity of it, and
the efficiency.
Well, that too.
But that's government. I mean, I think our expectations of the government being super efficient, mine have completely gone away.
If you're in trouble, the Fed is your best friend.
Right.
If you're doing your life, the Fed is your worst enemy. I mean, they're a pain in the ass. It's just, I'm the same way about it.
Yeah. So tell me about maybe something that you're working on now, a project, something that's in the works, or maybe that you just completed. Because you're an author.
Yeah, under a pseudonym. I'm trying to keep that separate. Yeah, I've been there were a couple of years ago, things changed in my life, and I just felt the need to write fiction. And so for the last 2 years, I've been that energetic guy who focuses on something, and I've self-published 12 novels in 2 years, and I've got 2 more that are almost done and waiting to put up, and I've got like 6 more on the griddle. And
I read about 2 books a year, and you're writing 12 in 2 years.
Well, that's assuming they're good books. If you're reading 2 really good books, man, that's all you need.
Yeah. So are these just pouring out of you? What does that look like?
It's crazy. I started I went to a conference at the end of March in Baltimore and came back and started writing first week in April on the East Room. And it's sort of a wish fulfillment of my family for me. And it's a multi-generational story and all that kind of stuff. And none of the characters are like my family. My brother's not in it. From writing fiction now, I believe all fiction is autobiographical. You can only write what you know. And even if it's out of your imagination, it's still you, okay? So if anybody knows me and they read these, they will think, well, that's what Steve's life must have been like. It's like, no, it isn't. But I wrote East Room about 100,000 words in a month and then spent a month cleaning it up. And as I was cleaning it up and finishing it and going through the publication process, the second book, After Regrets, came to mind. And, that thing came out and bang, it was done. And the third one, as I was writing After Regrets, came to mind, Yearning for Sophie. And I'm writing that, and that's first person from the point of view of a girl who decides to become a professional, become a prostitute, and she's a psychology major, and she uses psychology to be a more effective prostitute. And it's first person, so I'm writing like an 18-year-old girl going through college and becoming a prostitute.
Wow.
Thinking about it, and I have no idea who Sophie is, and it's like I've never wanted to be a prostitute. That's never been an appealing point of view, and I don't want to be a woman. Never thought of it. But this Sophie just started talking to me, so I'm writing Yearning for Sophie. A family event happened for me.
Do you think that is a supernatural thing? Having this voice of Sophie.
I have no idea. I don't believe it's Holy Spirit kind of thing. I don't believe if you saw Shakespeare in Love.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There was this recurring writer's conceit that I'm blocking the writer's name had for Shakespeare. When he sat down to write, he would like clap his hands and throw something in the air and spin around 3 times and then sit down and start writing. And that called his muse to him, and he was able to do it. It's like, I don't do that. I just sat down. Some of the books I got to block them out. I mean, like East Room's multi-generational. It starts about the Civil War, and when I went past the Trump election, and the book ends in 2020, and so I have no idea what's going on. So the book's like 150 years old. So I had to block things out, make sure I got dates right and didn't confuse people and all. But most of it is kind of like, I write on an index card, characters and various sequence, and then they just start talking. And these characters, and I will kind of have a scaffolding of an old friend or an old girlfriend, and she's just the scarecrow. And then the rest of the character emerges off of it, and it's like, it helps me if I can see Mo or Kathy or Patty or somebody like, I can see that starts it. But then Sophie comes out, or Jackson, or Sonny Boy, or any of the other characters. And they just talk to me. And, I'll start writing and they'll say, no, I'm not going to do that. And so it's like, backspace, erase that. And then Sonny says, yeah, that's okay. I'll do that. So it's just imagination and where it takes you. And then you get 2 or 3 or 4 things moving. Conflicts inevitably or obtain. Even good friends are going to have conflicts. And that's what happens in my books. And stuff happens from it.
That's great. So, and then lastly, one common word you always bring up to me is persuasion, and how that's been a major thing in your life. Can you kind of talk about how that's influenced you, where you've taken persuasion, and really, I don't know, how you see persuasion maybe, moving forward into the future with maybe what you're working with or just society? I mean, I know it's really open-ended.
It's a growth industry. Go long on persuasion. Anybody who's good at it is set for life. You will never starve. You will never want for anything if you understand persuasion. Thing is, most people don't understand persuasion.
Can you break it down for?
Sure. Our standard communication used to change, freely choosing other people. Communication, change, freely choosing other people. Okay, so no guns, money. That's not persuasion. It's dictionary, just words. Okay, through words you change the way of freely changing. Okay, an open-minded, they can tell you go to hell, or move on. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
There's a tremendous amount of scientific research on how you can change people with words. As I was telling you with my oath of office thing, a very simple way to get somebody very loyal, very committed to something they do not believe, okay, is to nudge them, and that's a bunch of bullshit. Everybody was nudging for a while, and he got a Nobel Prize for it. And the reason he got a Nobel Prize for the book Nudge is because he used persuasion. There was no persuasion in the book Nudge. Okay, everything around it was persuasion, and that's how he got his Nobel Prize. But knowing that I can move you to say, would you just please look at this information and read it over? It's an illustration. I can make college students say things about sexuality that they don't believe. Mm-hmm. And I set them up by saying, we're doing some research and we're trying to get middle school kids to engage in safe sex practices or particular sex practice, whatever it is, okay? And we've been looking for sources to deliver the message. One of the things we find is that they respect college students more than anybody else, okay? They don't want to hear from me. They don't want to hear from a preacher or something like that. But college guys they're role models, okay? So if they hear college guys saying these things about sex or safe sex or whatever it is, it kills them, mm-hmm. okay? So what I'd like for you to do is take this script, okay? And I want you to read it and we'll tape it, okay? And imagine you're talking to a 7th grader about this and realize the impact that it's going to have on their life when you do this and the lives that you might save with it. And then I turn around and I give you something that you completely I've already pre-tested you on this. I know you don't agree with anything that's on there. Mm-hmm. You look it over and it's, okay, all right. You rehearse. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. Ready to go with it? Okay, camera ready? All right, let's do light check, sound check. Okay, mm-hmm. Okay, we're ready to go. Okay, go ahead and do it. And the person reads this thing and their life changes. Mm-hmm. They now believe that. Mm-hmm. Okay? That's persuasion. Mm-hmm. Okay, doing things like that. Most people don't understand, and it goes to the rules, and the first rule is there are no laws of persuasion. Mm-hmm. Because if there were laws, why would I tell you? Mm-hmm. Right? If I had laws, I could move the world, and I wouldn't want anybody else fighting against me on it. Second rule is it's about the other guy stupid. And one of the biggest problems people have with persuasion is they always think through themselves. And it's like you've got to focus like a laser on who this guy is, how he moves. Okay, he's doing that. Has he been doing any of this stuff? How does he cross his legs? How does he dress? Should I talk like this? Mm-hmm. Should I move back a little way? Okay, do I talk? Okay. Can I give him something to read? Mm-hmm. Am I reassuring? Or should I get like this with him and make him answer my questions? Okay, and it's hard to be that manipulative. It's hard to get outside of yourself and focus so hard on the other person. That makes you persuasive when you realize it's about the other guy. And then the third one is the one I said to you over the table. All bad persuasion is sincere. Because, as I've been going on, I've been very sincere about the deep state, mm-hmm. my federal experiences, my love for my boss, Al, and contempt for other people and all that. That's not good persuasion. People are going to be watching this and thinking, this guy's loony, or, he's too intense, he's passionate, he's sincere, and all. Well, yeah, I am about that kind of stuff. If I'm trying to move you, I'm not. Mm-hmm. My passion goes in the back seat. My mm-hmm. sincerity goes in the back seat. So, yeah. It's just you.
Are you teaching others persuasion?
I do some I do some coaching, teaching. Mm-hmm. I stopped doing it. I mean, I'm fully retired now and living in an undisclosed location in the mountains, and it's great. I love it. And if a big one came up, I stay in touch with some military intelligence type guys and talk about stuff.
Are you worried about your teachings or your works on persuasion as being used in a negative way?
Oh no, not at all. It's kind of like I'm selling guns. Okay, I'll sell the gun to anybody. And in fact, actually, I want everybody to have guns, because if everybody has guns, it kind of equalizes, it kind of levels it off. The real danger in all of it is really not the gun. It's the guy. It's the vampire, the panther, the werewolf. And just somebody realizing, geez, if I don't have a conscience. Nietzsche wrote a book, Beyond Good and Evil, and he talked about that truth actually gets in the way of human progress, and falsehood is actually a more progressive concept and does more to free the human mind than truth does, because truth locks you into a box. You got to believe the truth. Falsehoods could be anything. We can go anywhere with it.
When our imagination goes.
Yeah, okay, well, think like that. Think about falsehoods. You know what? Me selling you a falsehood is good for you. It makes your life better. I am helping this guy. If you can think like that, okay, it doesn't matter what gun, what persuasion tactic, whether you use foot in the door or dissonance manipulations or misattribution, or, you can go online at my persuasion blog with healthy influence, another joke. Healthy influence. I'm a good guy. You can trust me. I'm going to teach you the good influence. And it's like, but I fooled people with that. That's why I came up with the name. There'd be a lot of people would hear this persuasion stuff, and it's like, this is mean. This is putting, you're imposing your will on another guy and you're blindsiding them. I'm not going to do that. What if I call it pro-social persuasion? Where your work actually makes the other guy's life better. Well, I want some of that. It's the same gun. Use the same techniques, but pro-social, healthy influence, all that kind of stuff. I'm a liberal Democrat. I'm here to help.
Yeah.
As opposed to, well, actually, I don't want to kill people. And I think of, persuasion kill boxes, literally, of how you can use media and communication to get bad guys to go into a small area, and then we send an old B-52 or a Navy SEAL team or whoever it is, and they just shoot them all up. None of our guys get hurt. It's done in 30 seconds. Great. I know how to do that. I know how to get guys into kill boxes. And I teach people how to do that kind of stuff. And it's like, is that wrong? Is that bad? It's not sincere. It's not passionate. It is a total disregard. I'm working beyond the perimeter of good and evil with all of this stuff. And it's like, ethics don't have anything to do with it. It's just, do I get the change I want out of the other guy? Do they exercise? Do they walk into this room so I can blow them up? It's the same thing.
When did you get hooked on when did persuasion become a part of you?
That first grade thing, and realizing that when I stood up and people would listen to me, when I went to the PTA meeting and stood up as the first person to walk down, and all the adults were embarrassed, and I stood up and gave a very coherent argument for getting a better dictionary in the library, and we got the damn dictionary.
First grade?
Or sixth grade. And, everybody was like, well, that's a pretty, yes, okay, that's yes, okay. Well, I think, and the librarians were like, well, yes, and they were like, librarians were even thinking, we should have primed this guy for some other stuff, because, he's selling, our stuff and our product. I just remember from an extremely young age being able to get adults to do things that this is stupid. This is insane that I'm able to do it. And then learning more and more techniques. And
have you done coaching with CEOs? Maybe they're trying to motivate or.
I haven't tried. I haven't sold myself that way. I have been working with some people one-on-one, and again, I am just flabbergasted at the persuasion kill boxes that people have all the time. And then now use the word kill metaphorically. You're going to get your client or the other guy to do what you want to do. You're going to kill them the way actors talk about killing the audience with their performance. Okay, I'm amazed at high-powered people all the time talking about this is what they're doing. I think, how did you get this job? you're killing your credibility with it. You're letting bad guys sneak up on you. You're losing options with these things. Here are all these little simple plays that you could be making that would just open up your world and allow you to do so much more. And a lot of times, if I've talked with people about it, the first thing that comes up is that ethics, pro-social, and it's like, well, you're telling me to like bushwhack people, to set them up. Well, yeah, that's exactly what I'm. Why are you changing them in the first place? Well, you're saying they're too stupid to know what their own good is, and you are pro-social in that sense. It's like, how arrogant is that? You know, the idea that you know so much more than another person about their own life that you need to persuade them so they're better people. Okay, and somebody else who's more cold-hearted about getting what they want, it's like, well, that's actually more honest about what's going on. It's still, ethics are off to the side. You got to live with you and God on all that kind of stuff, and there are no ethics in persuasion.
Yeah.
Ethics are in you, and you have to decide what you want to do with it.
Fascinating. It's been a great conversation. Is there anything that you want to cover just to kind of wrap things up, Brett?
No.
No? It's been awesome, man.
Okay.
Thank
Good
you
to see
so
you again.
much. Great to see you. Well, I'm sure we'll do this again, but thanks for coming in and hanging out.
Don't trouble at all.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Cool.
Good job.